3, 2. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
My name is Derek Davis. Welcome to the House Economic Matters Committee. There are 4 bills before us today. House Bill 2, in order, they will be taking House Bill 294, Delegate Williams, House Bill 338, Delegate Ebersol, House Bill 239, Delegate Rogers, and Delegate Branch will be batting cleanup with House Bill 261. With that, Delegate Williams, welcome to the House Economic Matters Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Vice Chair, and the other members of the House Economic Matters Committee. I'm so happy to be before you this afternoon regarding House Bill 294. This bill, also known as the Business, Occupations, and Professions Architect Scope Licensure Bill. I first introduced this bill last legislative session. It was House Bill 1087 last session, with an issue that was brought to my attention by constituent Mr. Jeff Lemieux of Greenbelt, who is co-owner along with his wife, Lori Lemieux, of bicycle shop in College Park. As a small business owner, Mr. and Mrs. Lemieux faced difficulties with the $5,000 cap on how much could be spent on modifications and repairs to an existing building or structure before having to hire an architect to sign off on those plans before submitting those plans to the county for a building permit. When that threshold is exceeded, they have to go ahead and hire an architect, which could possibly cost the applicant at least $5,000 or more, sometimes end up being equal to, if not exceeding, the cost of the actual product. Working as a real estate attorney myself outside of the legislature, I'm frequently in contact with architects and engineers. And for large projects that require major alterations, the need to have an architect to approve the plans before construction definitely is absolutely valid in those particular circumstances. However, while the current law is written to prevent violations to building codes and uphold public safety, it simultaneously prevents many from making the necessary changes to a structure because of the affordability in hiring an architect. This year's version of the bill is the same as the amended version from last session, which would raise the threshold to $25,000, allowing more room for individuals to make repairs without having to hire an architect. This updated language of the bill is more narrowly defined in its intentions by specifying the kinds of alterations and repairs that would be allowed under the new statute and requiring that they adhere to the guidelines laid out in the Maryland Rehabilitation Code. And so I believe that this legislation will open the doors for more small business owners and homeowners to conduct the necessary renovations without taking on an excessive financial burden. And for those reasons, I'm urging this committee to please give a favorable report and to pass House Bill 294.
Hey, Zach, can you change my background? Because now these are public hearings.
Delegate Fisher, we can hear you. Delegate Williams.
Yes.
Are you telling us that this is a bill that we passed last year out of committee that amended, went to the House, and did it die in the Senate or did it run out?
Well, it didn't. It actually, it's the same bill that I presented before this committee last session. I don't think it came to a vote last session just because, honestly, of timing. I think my bill hearing was literally probably a week right before we began to send our staff home and begin to shut down. So
where did the amendment come from? Did we,
The amendment was in consultation and conversations that I had with the Architect Association. I believe Dan Bailey is on the call today on behalf of the Architects Association, because initially they were in opposition of the bill. However, in conversations with them, we were able to come to an agreement and modify the bill. And so I do not believe they are no longer in opposition to the bill. And so the bill before you reflects the amendments that were worked out last session with the Architect Association.
got it, got it. Are there any other questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, thank you very much. Since you mentioned it, let's go with Mr. Dan Bailey.
Hi, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chairman Davis and committee members. My name is Dan Bailey. I'm past president and current director of AIA Maryland, which represents nearly 2,000 architects statewide. First, I would like to very much thank Delegate Williams and her legislative aide, Deja Williams, for their gracious efforts to engage AIA Maryland in a collaborative discussion with respect to the substance of this bill. AIA Maryland asks for your support of this bill, which modifies regulations that define the scope or circumstances by which a licensed architect must be employed. AIA Maryland admittedly had some initial concerns, as Delegate Williams was just mentioning a moment ago, when the bill was initially introduced last year. We felt that the safety, health, and welfare of Maryland citizens may be compromised, and that compliance with current Maryland codes and regulations, especially the Maryland Rehabilitation Code, building, life safety, and accessibility codes, may not be met. However, the efforts of Delegate Williams, DLLR, and the bill's constituents resulted in the negotiation of revisions now successfully reflected in HB 294. The bill appropriately sets project construction cost limits that adjust the current regulatory limits for inflation. Some of you may not be aware that the original limits were set roughly back in 1990. So there's roughly 3 decades of consistency in those limits. Furthermore, the bill sets clear parameters and, most importantly, maintains that the designated code official, or as we often term it, the authority having jurisdiction, may require such alterations or repairs to be documented and sealed by a licensed architect. And again, these provisions allow that official to override any existing provisions. As a quick aside, the bill came to fruition as a result of an insightful delegate and a concerned organization finding common ground. As Deja Williams so reminded me the other day, the very last time each of us shook hands with anyone was with each other. I have promised Deja and Delegate Williams that theirs will be the first hands I shake when we are past this tragic virus. Hence, AIA Maryland respectfully asks for the committee to vote in favor of HB 294. Thank you.
Are there any questions of Mr. Bailey?
Delegate Aaron's.
Delegate Aaron's.
Yeah, just, are you saying that local boards and what have you have approved this, or accept this bill? My local planning board?
No, no planning board or local regulatory entity or unit has spoken on, at least to my knowledge, has spoken up on this particular bill. However, the provisions of this bill allow any given board or any given authority having jurisdiction to request or require the seal and documentation by an architect or engineer on any given project. So this bill does not override their ability to do so.
Okay, so you haven't brought this in front of Mako, delegate, have you?
Not to my knowledge, unless the delegate has brought it before any other existing jurisdiction.
No,
We
it,
have-
it hasn't been brought before Mako. I do remember last session, actually my local Department of Permitting, Inspections and Enforcement did review this bill in Prince George's County. Our permitting office initially had the same reservations that AIA Maryland had, but were fine with the amendments that were proposed, and I do not believe they have provided any opposition to this bill. But I do not believe last session nor this session, Mako or MML has weighed in on this legislation.
Delegate Aaron's, if I can, the Maryland Municipal League, they have written testimony in support of it. So we don't have anything in the file from Mako, but MML, we have written testimony and support from them.
Thanks, Chair.
And I
did-
might add that DLLR was part of our negotiations last year, and we're in agreement with this particular bill and to the limits that were set.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Anyone else? If not, let me go to Laurie Lemieux.
All right.
Ms.
I'm sorry.
Lemieux?
I'm here. I was unmuting. Sorry about that. Good afternoon. I am speaking in support of House Bill 294. My name is Laurie Lemieux. I am the majority owner of Proteus Bicycles in College Park since 2012. I am a proud resident of Prince George's County since 1984. Proteus Bicycles has been serving Maryland residents since around 1972, we think. And I thank the committee for hearing my views today. In 2018, our shop relocated from the original store site on US Route 1, Baltimore Avenue in College Park, to a site vacated by Mom's Organic Market and the Hollywood Shopping Center in North College Park. The renovation work was very simple. It included flooring, drywall patching, electrical cleanup, and some plumbing fixes. We did a lot of the painting and finish work ourselves, and a retired architect friend volunteered to do the design layout and help us navigate the code requirements. There were no structural changes or wall construction, yet because the cost of the work was more than $5,000, we had to file a full set of architectural drawings signed by a licensed architect and stamped by a licensed engineer to get permits. The cost of those drawings alone was over $10,000 and actually delayed our permit process significantly. The bill would update the threshold for licensed architectural stamp from $5,000 to $25,000. It would be progress for small businesses, certainly in the right direction. And as you know, the $5,000 threshold is out of date, and it can present a huge obstacle to small businesses trying to make minor renovations. House Bill 294 would make starting or improving a small business in Maryland more accessible. We are not suggesting that the actual building standards be reduced. As a business owner, I know to hire excellent contractors and tradespeople to do the work and understand that we have to operate according to code and inspections, and we respect that. Prince George's County now has a permit office with a business development advocate to help businesses like ours navigate all the red tape, which we encountered during our renovations. We recently benefited from services from the county business development advocate when we added a cafe in our bike store called Proteus Brews. And that cafe was able to open in 2020, despite the pandemic. We opened in October due to their excellent services, so we do appreciate that. House Bill 294 would give Prince George's the flexibility to implement a more consultative-based permitting system with less burdensome paperwork requirements for small businesses doing minor rehab work. I want to thank Delegate Nicole Williams for sponsoring this bill, and also thank the committee for hearing my testimony in support of House Bill 294. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joseph Conwell. Not hearing Mr. Conwell. That concludes the witness list for House Bill 294. Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. I'd now like to switch over to House Bill 38 and Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. This is Delegate Eric Ebersol for the record to speak to you in support of House Bill 338. This is a bill that I've reintroduced from last session. It's called Business Regulation, Innkeepers, Records, and Human Trafficking Awareness. I've become a bit of an advocate for helping to tamp down human trafficking in the state of Maryland. A few years ago, I was able to enact legislation, or the legislature enacted legislation that I introduced, which required an element of training for truckers who are in a unique position to identify maybe human trafficked. At the time, the advocates came to me and said they would also think that people working at hospitality sites would also be in a unique position to do that. I don't have to get into the details of human trafficking. None of us are not aware of the horrors of it. We've heard so many stories, so I won't waste your time with those descriptions. You have them yourself. What I will say is that people in hospitality and innkeeper situations, as the bill language uses, are in a unique position to recognize it and perhaps report it. This bill only asks that the state come up with a training program, probably something that would be more like a PowerPoint or a video that would take 15 minutes to watch to get a sense of what the signals are. I don't know them all myself very well, but I imagine a lot of people who work at hospitality locations don't either exactly. What makes human trafficking a unique thing to recognize. And it doesn't mandate that someone who is trained have to report. So what it does is it does ask innkeepers to keep records of who's been at their sites. They have to keep sort of a computerized record so that in case we would need to do an investigation of someone being there for a period of time. And also if a person who's working at one of those locations felt they were seeing it and felt a need to report it. There is a requirement to be done annually. All of these things are up for amendment depending on how onerous or how easy they are for innkeepers to do. We did introduce the bill early, and last year we offered a couple of amendments. I realized that we didn't include them because they never sort of got included. I would just mention them if there's interest in them. One was to have the training also include the possible role of someone working at an innkeep situation to actually be able to report it, where they would call, how they would make a report, and also just the difference between labor trafficking and sex trafficking. These were actually suggestions by the hotel industry last year. We can include those or not. I'll be happy to draw up the amendments if anyone's interested in them. I didn't bring a panel because they spoke last year and did many of the things that I referenced earlier, talking about human trafficking. There are a couple of letters in the witness file. I encourage you to read them. I've been working with the folks at Howard County and Human Trafficking Awareness, and they have certainly been very interested in us pushing this forward. And with that, I'll save you as much time as I can and offer to answer questions if you'd like me to.
Any questions for Delegate Ebersol? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Seeing one,
sir.
sure.
Delegate Walker.
Yeah, thank you. Delegate Ebersol, like the bill, just trying to get some clarity. So does this affect like Airbnbs as well?
No, in fact, the hotel industry last year tried to get me to include that, but we felt that would drive that industry out of business. The ability of a single Airbnb person to do it, to try to keep those kind of records and train each one of them. So we didn't put that in. If you feel that would be manageable, I think it'd be a great thing to include. I think that would be very difficult for that version of the industry to be included. By the way, good to see you, Delegate Walker.
It's good to see you too, Eric. Sorry, Delegate Ebersol.
No, that's all right.
Why would it be? I'm wondering because like what I'm hearing now is people are starting to complain about folks renting these houses out and throwing these sex parties or trafficking parties, things that.
Yeah.
So if they're getting away from hotels and starting these houses, why do you think it would put the Airbnb business out of business?
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate that I think it's a great idea if you think it's a great idea, by the way. The reason I was concerned is because many people who are running Airbnbs aren't in direct physical contact with the places that they're renting all the time. And so they might have difficulty being trained and being alert there. But a training program for people who are in Airbnb, at least so they were aware, with no requirement of reporting and no necessity of them necessarily saying that they would have eyes on everybody, I would welcome that amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
Delegate Mouts.
Thanks, Chairman. Hey, Delegate Uppersall, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Delegate Mouts.
Thank you for bringing this bill. And I kind of had a question about the bill going towards enforcement. This is going to one business sector. But in my experience, there's been this issue of enforcement. And when there's a trafficking situation and there are allegations of trafficking, the question is, who do you call? And I didn't know if there's anything in this legislation that dealt with enforcement or possibly, I don't know, somehow coordinating the enforcement side. Because when instances come up, businesses that I've dealt with didn't know who to call. And then once we got them somebody to call, the phone call happened, and then the time passes so quickly that it just kind of, I guess, falls through the cracks.
Yeah, so there's two kinds of enforcement. Enforcement that the innkeepers are doing the training. And, you don't want to get too heavy-handed. So the bill just says that they would be asked to certify that they had trained their employees. And then the enforcement of the action against the crime, again, that's one of the amendments that we offered last year, put that in there that said that it would, at least the training would have the role of, or the ability of, employees to make contact with the appropriate enforcement agency in that danger. And I now that you've mentioned it, I think what I'll do is I'll have this amendment drawn up and deliver it to the committee for consideration if they'd like to, along with this bill.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your
Delegate-
consideration.
Hold on, I think Delegate Aaron's.
I thought I was off the hook. Okay, here we go.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, what is the punishment phase? Like, how do we hold these inns and places accountable? How do we judge them?
There wasn't any in this bill. As I said, we got to be sensitive to businesses. A lot of these are small motels and hotels. And, we're going to have to believe that they think this is a bad thing too. And that the agency will ask them to certify that they've done the training. And that's really that's all they're looking for in this case. If they're not doing it, they might say they are. This is a problem, but not one that I think we can solve by laying a heavy hand on them.
Okay, thank you.
Right, if there are no additional questions, let me go to Amy Rohr.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the committee. Amy Rohrer here on behalf of the Maryland Hotel Lodging Association. You have my written testimony, I believe, in front of you, indicating our position of favorable with amendments. Certainly, this is not a topic that is new to us, and the hotel industry really has been proactive in addressing this at our hotels. There are very good training programs that are already out there that were developed specifically for our industry. That it was done with input from major hotel brands and also NGOs such as ECPAT and Polaris. It is something that we would suggest could be used, and we hope that it would meet the requirements of this bill rather than having the state go out and develop some new training. We would ask for your consideration of all of the work and investments that have been made already by the industry, as we know this is an issue, and we want to make sure that our employees are trained and aware of it. And know what to do if they see it happening at their hotel. So I can certainly share more information with the committee about those programs that are already out there. Also, to Delegate Meltz's question about, steps that you need to take, steps that you may need to take, if human trafficking occurs at a hotel, what should the employees do? They need to know how to actually report it. And something that we encourage all of our hotels to do, and many of them already are doing, is developing policies and procedures. And that is number 5. In my testimony, we have 6 different suggestions for amendments. Number 5 addresses those policies and procedures that would address reporting. Another thing that we would ask for your consideration of is 45 days for training new hire employees. At the end of the day, we know that offering this training is simply the right thing to do. And we do think that this should also apply to short-term rentals. Certainly, the more awareness there is in our industry, the more success we're going to have in eradicating it from our properties. Jim Stark is a hotel operator who is also here, signed up to testify. I'm sure he and I both are happy to answer any of your questions, but very much welcome an opportunity to work with the committee and the bill sponsor on amendments that we think makes this a stronger bill and aligns with steps that the industry has already taken. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none.
Yes, I have one.
Yes, Delegate Impalaria. You're muted, Delegate Impalaria.
There we go. Sorry about that. Amy, many of us rent houses down here from a place called Annapolis Accommodations. So Annapolis Accommodations has never, ever walked into the unit that I'm renting whatsoever, yet they're renting it, and the owner lives in California. And you said you would like to see Airbnbs in small places have to do this. Explain to me how someone in California or someone, 10 blocks away who never comes near this place, it would benefit them to have training and that they would know what's going on inside the place. Explain that to me.
My understanding, certainly there has to be somebody who is coming in to a short-term rental property. They all operate in various ways, but somebody is going to come in to clean in between guests being
Nope,
there.
nobody comes in and cleans. Nope, they don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I'm just telling you, no, they don't.
but when I think about short-term rentals, I'm thinking about the short-term rentals where there's a turnover in guests. For example, the party houses and the sex parties that were mentioned. If there is training that is being done and there's a turnover in guests, then having the employees trained or the owners trained, having those people trained and knowing what signs you would look for, even if it's after the guest has checked out, if you know what to look for that, are indicators of human trafficking occurring, those indicators can be reported to law enforcement. They do have records of who has stayed in their properties. And if something suspicious is happening, it should be reported, but you have to be trained in knowing what to look for in order to know what's appropriate to report.
So I rent Airbnb up at Deep Creek Lake. And when I rent that Airbnb up at Deep Creek Lake, I do it online. I pay it through a money app. They see a code. I unlock the door. I never see anybody. When I leave, a private cleaning company that they've hired that are not employees may come in and clean it, or the deal may be that I'm supposed to leave in the same condition as when I came in. Once again, no one comes in contact with me or that property the entire time I'm there. They're nowhere near it. How do you train them? Why would you want to train them? The bill seems like if this is good for the hotel industry and you guys seem to love it, that's great. I don't see anybody from the individual rental businesses coming in saying they want it. So why would you want to force this on someone who, to me, it makes no sense to do it, because I don't know how they would do it. I don't know how someone in California knows what I'm doing in the house that I'm in. I don't know what 2 girls 3 blocks away know what I'm doing. I really don't want them down here spying on me. I understand in the hotel, you know, if you want to train your pool cleaner, and if you want to train the guy who mows your grass, and you want to train all the people who clean the rooms, God bless you. I think that's wonderful. But as far as trying to push this on Airbnb and private rentals, I don't see how it works. And you know, I don't think you can tell me how it works. I don't think it would. That's it.
All righty.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions of Ms. Rohrer? If not, thank you very much. And let's go to Ari Plout.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Ari Plout from Boston Plout Law Offices here on behalf of the Maryland Hotel Lodging Association with Amy and Jim Stark as well. And just wanted to reach out to the committee, let them know that we support this bill with amendments that Amy had mentioned and that were submitted as written testimony. And just wanted to be an advocate in this fight against human trafficking. Our industry has been proactive, and we're here to help make this bill a good piece of legislation moving forward and putting an end to this issue that has been troubling Maryland. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and would defer to Jim Stark to also touch up on some of the amendments that we had and some of the issues concerning hotels on a more personal level. Thank you.
Any questions? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim Stark.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for taking the time to hear us today. I am the general manager of the Best Western Plus BWI Arundel Mills located in Howard County. And I can let you know that January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And that's something that I know, being a member of the hotel industry, we take extremely seriously. Training of our staff, we take very seriously. I know all the major brands and the majority of independent owners and operators that I know take the training of their staff very seriously. We actually work hand in hand with the Howard County Police. They actually have a special division within their department that focuses on this because it is a major issue up and down the 95 corridor. So it's something that we're very involved in. When we hire employees, they're trained. For us at my hotel, they were trained within a matter of weeks. I know the standard typically is within 30 days. That's most major brands. And it's something that we're very much aware of. And I just want to circle back to something that Amy was saying and some comments that were made earlier. You know, if you have a serious health issue, and let's just say it's cancer, and cancer is awful, and human trafficking is an absolutely disgusting illegal activity. You go in and you have surgery, you want to get all of it. You just don't want to cut out the majority of it. And I think what happens is when you have a situation where you have Airbnbs or other third parties, not just to point out Airbnb, but there's lots of different lodging situations, not just hotels. When you create a void, the void becomes a vacuum. And instead of eliminating the illegal activity, you're just shifting it. So I think, yes, it is a very good question. Okay, how do you implement the training? How do you implement the focus on how those sorts of things, those sorts of entities can police themselves, can monitor, can identify this activity, can work with local law enforcement? And I would just suggest that's a very important conversation to have. And you know how this body identified that it is a major issue, and it's a major issue across the country, and we're addressing it with hotels. We need to take a step further and say, okay, is that going to be the complete fix? Because it's disgusting. You know, human trafficking is disgusting. So if you're going to make a move to eliminate it and help identify it, if the problem is hard, we can't just turn our head to a part of it that's hard. You know, dealing with Airbnbs and their very unique, place and lodging, but they're a very big part of lodging. And I would just submit that if we are very, very hard in hotels, which we have been, that's why they've sort of segued towards using these other types of lodging. Like I'm using Airbnb generically, because that fix is a little bit tougher. And the people that do this for a living, that make millions and millions of dollars off of these victims, that's something that should be taken seriously. Thank you.
Yeah.
Delegate Walker.
Thank you. I wanted to wait till Mr. Stark spoke so I could ask. I was going to ask it to the previous speaker as well. So right now, under this bill legislation and with your training you currently have, you all suspect something. You guys collect this data, and I'm assuming you turn it into law enforcement.
If we see anything that's suspicious, I mean, obviously, as hotels and even in the other segment, the Airbnb world, everybody has to retain data for a certain period of time anyway, guest data. So that's retained. But if we see something that we deem to be suspicious, we report that immediately for us in Howard County, we have a very specific number that we call, and they investigate immediately. You know, we don't get involved. We turn it over to the authorities and let the professionals handle it.
So typically, is that during the process? So like, you know, something doesn't look right, they call this number and then they come in and act immediately, or is it more after the guest might have left?
They act immediately.
Okay.
100%. You know, if the guests are still there, they act immediately. If we go into a room after somebody has checked out, and let's just say there's signs of very, very suspicious activity, then they come and investigate, and that's when they want to have access to the records to see who paid for the room, who stayed there, and they kind of work backwards from there.
And so, and it could be used even, you know, if somebody comes in to get you suspect something, they only use the room for one day, and then they want to come 3 days later, and it may be another 1 day rental, or maybe another 1 day rental. Would that trigger something?
If you're the front desk person, you can kind of and all my staff, they've been there for quite a while, they can kind of pick up on weird or unusual behavior. Mm-hmm. And so if it happens to hit a trigger, and there've been other instances where we might think something funny is going on and it's not funny at all, you know, but we'd much rather err on the side of caution and, you know, make a phone call and have it investigated a little bit.
So let me ask, in the case of an Airbnb, like I'm under the assumption most Airbnbs, their short-term rentals are, you know, 2 or 3 days. A lot of them put the 3 day minimums on there at least, or 2 day minimums on there. So if this were an Airbnb owner, somebody came in, maybe the neighbors may complain if they saw something that they thought was wrong, but having them, how would you suggest, I guess, because I see it as a problem, it seems like some other delegates may not. How would you suggest the Airbnbs participate in this? Given the example that you were told earlier, how do you think they would, how do you think the Airbnb would participate if the owner of the property is not there? They're just renting it out. They're just basically a management company.
I mean, I certainly have my own theories on that. Now I can defer to Ari and Amy. But I think if you're in business and you have a rental property and you own that rental property and you are in business to rent that property and profit off of that property, you have to have a little bit of skin in the game for accountability and responsibility for the use of that property. And 10, 15, 20 years ago, where human trafficking may not have been a huge of an issue, or if it was certainly muted off the radar. Now that that's prevalent, I think that becomes something that, you know, people can't just hide and say, listen, I'm renting a house on the West Coast, I live on the East Coast, that's not my problem. I actually think it is your problem. I think, you know, either the cleaning companies, the maintenance company, whoever is coming in, or the management company that's actually managing the thing, there has to be a little bit of ownership and responsibility. That's certainly not something you can just throw your hands up in the air about, because it will shift. I mean, hotels are cracking down on it. And just like the gentleman said earlier, there has been a shift to Airbnb because they know that that's a little bit harder to police and a little bit harder to enforce and see. So that's why they're doing it. So,
Mr. Chairman, are we hearing from anybody from Airbnb signed up in opposition or for this bill at all?
No.
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 All right. It's a tough one, isn't it? I'm gonna kind of agree with Delegate Impalaire a little bit. It's a rental property. It's a property I own and I'm using it to make income for this. Just like if you own an apartment building, you rent it to the tenants and you can't necessarily tell the tenants, you know, what to do there. You may not want them smoking in the house or stuff like that. So I would like to talk to you all about, I do see it as a problem. However, I'm not letting them off the hook. I would like to get some information from you all on what you think the enforcement should be. And I'll reach out to Airbnb as well. And thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Delegate Wilson.
Delegate Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few, because I don't want to keep going down this road. We have differentiated between Airbnbs and hotels. I want to make sure that the committee understands that. And while this problem is obviously runs the gamut. There is a huge difference between the way hotels run a business and an individual owns possibly a second or maybe even third home that they rent out. And I want to make sure that we understand that, number one, that they're two different entities. And two, we can't keep throwing. It's one thing for a hotel whose sole responsibility is to basically house individuals versus an individual who happens to have a home that he inherited from his grandparents to be somehow responsible, because that's what we start doing when we bring them in for this requirement of training. We also bring them into possible litigation for being responsible for what goes on in those Airbnbs. So I want to make sure that as we move forward, we do so judiciously. And secondly, having worked on the Human Trafficking Task Force for 8 years on the East Coast, Airbnbs were never the problem. And before we get to Airbnbs or somebody's basement apartment, why don't we start with the hotels? Let's keep it simple, keep it streamlined, because we've differentiated between the two. I don't want to jump down that rabbit hole till we solve problem one. We can go to problem 2 and 3 down the road, but I just don't want to keep walking down, because we're going to have a very difficult time establishing who's responsible. Is it the management company? Is it the owner? Is it the person who rents on the owner's behalf? I think we really should keep this narrow to where it's been defined, not amended to include Airbnbs until we have more data and we've done our job with the hotels first.
Anyone else?
So I was looking for the question. What was that question, Dr. Wilson? Or you were just stating your case?
Isn't that so?
I got you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Stark. And that concludes our hearing on House Bill 338. I would now like to go to Delegate Rogers for House Bill 39.
Good afternoon, Chairman Davis, Vice Chair DeMay, and colleagues of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Mike Rogers, and I respectfully request a favorable report for House Bill 239, which last year was House Bill 929, and this requires certain property managers to be either licensed by the Maryland Real Estate Commission or to be registered with the Maryland Real Estate Commission. So I will remind the committee that this bill actually came before us last year. It passed out of committee 24-0. It passed the House 134-0, and it did not get a hearing in the Senate as we ran out of time. So with that, I would respectfully ask a favorable report for this consumer protection bill is what it actually is.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Adams?
Delegate Rogers, does this bill apply to people that own rental properties? Let's say they own 20 rentals and they manage these themselves. This doesn't apply to them, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much. Tom Ballantine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tom Ballantine. I'm with NAIOP Maryland. We're a commercial real estate trade association. And since about 2017, when this prior version of this bill was introduced, we have worked with bill sponsors and the Maryland Association of Realtors on addressing a number of concerns about the scale, its application to commercial real estate, and the sensitivity of the bill to the way that we deliver services through related business entities and multiple divisions within the same companies. We think the compromise amendments address our concerns, and we'd just like to thank Delegate Rogers for his consideration and would endorse those. And I also believe that the Maryland Multi-Housing Association has a clarifying amendment about ownership, the right of owners to work on their own property, and we think that's a good addition. So with that, we just urge your support of the bill, your favorable report with the amendments. Thank you.
Any question of Mr. Ballantine? Thank you very much. Bill Costelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Bill Castelli on behalf of the Maryland Realtors. I won't go through the bill again since this is a repeat for most of you, but this legislation would require registration of property managers. Right now, under the real estate licensing law, there are many real estate licensees who do perform property management. And there's kind of an enforcement loophole that exists in the law right now. Back in 2017, there were a number of licensees who actually violated the licensing law by absconding with rent monies, not handling the security deposits appropriately, and they actually had their license taken away. But the problem with Maryland law is that while the licensing statute contemplates property management as one of the activities for licensing, due to Court of Appeals opinions and direction from the Attorney General's office, you really don't have to have a license to do property management. So the industry realized that those individuals who had a license suspended or taken away would have literally been able to open up shop the next day and still conducted their property management activities without the license. So this gives the commission the ability to close that loophole a little bit and assess whether that individual can still get a registration if they've had their license taken away. The number of amendments have been mentioned. The amendments really go to addressing some of the issues that Mr. Valentine indicated, just making sure that the entity itself is the one that's registered rather than every single individual person providing a specific management function for those companies. Clarifying that business improvement districts would also be exempt the same way that an HOA or a condo community would be. And clarifying that the commission's authority is really related or is directly related to whether that person had a real estate license or not. There's an additional amendment that we support with MMHA, just clarifying that if you're an owner of these properties, you're conducting these property management services personally, that you would be exempt from this requirement. It's really those property managers working on behalf of an other owner providing these services that would have the registration requirement.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Bill, I have a question for you. Notwithstanding the merits of this particular piece of legislation, why would you advocate for more regulation and more fees during a pandemic if you really are representing realtors who are and owners of property and managers of property who are just reeling from this recession? Why would you do it this year if you were really representing realtors?
Well, so I definitely understand your concerns, and we have some of the same concerns. I will tell you the real estate industry has had an interesting year. There's a lot of commercial real estate that has had a difficult time, but there is certainly a lot on the residential side where, despite all the terrible things that have happened this year, the residential market has definitely been a little bit better. But we see this moving forward. We see that there has absolutely been an enforcement loophole that's existed with the Real Estate Commission. The situation that we're in with COVID doesn't change that, and we think that
I just want to hear this: the situation of COVID with owning property and further regulating them and adding on fees doesn't matter to you as a representative of the real estate agents of the real estate industry? I mean, are you serious?
That's not what I said, Delegate. I said,
well, why don't you restate it so I can understand what you said?
Sure. I said that the COVID doesn't change whether this regulatory loophole exists or not. So the fact that there is a regulatory loophole and the fact that you have someone who absconded with rental monies, didn't even submit it to the owner of the property, took it from the tenant, didn't submit it to the owner of the property, could still theoretically go up and open that business the same day. So we think, that's not a good situation, especially for owners who, are experiencing issues. They want to still be able to get their money that they're due. And so we think this does close that regulatory loophole.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much. Grayson Wiggins.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Grayson Wiggins here on behalf of the Maryland Multi-Housing Association. We sincerely appreciate Delegate Rogers' amendments to the bill and his willingness to talk to us before the hearing today. As was noted, we do have an additional amendment. Our amendment simply clarifies that a property owner is not required to register in order to provide services to the properties that they own. Owners who provide services to their own properties are landlords. They are already subject to both state and local regulation, including licensing, inspections, and fees. Requiring them to also register as property managers just seems a little over the top to us. The amendment will not obscure the original intent of the legislation. The bill will still require registration from the small third-party property managers, which were the impetus behind the bill. As currently written, page 3, line 1, the bill requires owners of more than 3 properties to register with the commission to provide services to their own properties. We're simply asking to clarify that if you own it, you don't have to register to provide the services. In light of the high delinquency rates caused by the pandemic, and with respect to the current regulatory processes established for landlords at the state and local level, we respectfully request a favorable report from the committee with the sponsors amendment plus the one we offered today. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Chairman Johnny here with a question.
Delegate Mouts.
Thank you, Chairman. Grayson, real quickly, so we've got a problem over here on the shore in that there aren't many property managers. So what do you do if you can't find a property manager, or there isn't a licensed property manager, or what if there isn't a property manager that that feasibly would be able to manage the property? A lot of our low-income housing is managed, on a shoestring type budget, especially, what we've just gone through, where a lot of these properties are now in jeopardy because of the moratorium on evictions. So what is the bright line for these housing unit holders? Who can they have manage their property and who can't manage their property, and what do they do?
Yeah, so under the bill as currently drafted, if you couldn't find a property manager and you owned 3 or more properties, you would have to register. So you'd have to pay the fee and you'd have to get the $100,000 security bond, or surety bond, excuse me. So that would put an additional fee and additional onus on those property owners. Again, our amendment just says if you own the property, you do not have to register to provide services to your own properties, in part because you're already regulated as a landlord since you're owning the property, renting it out, and offering those services. I would also note, if you have somebody that can't find a property manager, you have my number. Please call me. I will help you connect them.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to hire someone to do that. I mean, and I'm thinking of the scenario of individuals that have housing and they've got several homes, and they rent those homes. They would not be able, they'd have to hire a licensed property manager should this become law.
Or become one themselves. Yes, our amendment would change that and say that if you own it, you do not have to register as a property manager to offer those services, to manage your property.
Is there any leeway for fiscal feasibility?
Can you be a little more specific?
So if a property owner could demonstrate that it wasn't feasible for them to do it themselves and they need to hire someone to help them do it, that somehow they would be carved out of the requirement?
Well, if they hired someone else to do it, they would be hiring a property manager. I would also note that I believe the bill has an exemption if you hire one person to provide the services to another person, like on a one-to-one basis, that you are exempt from registration as well. But Bill may be able to be more specific on that than I am.
Thanks, Grayson.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? If not, thank you very much. That concludes our hearing on House Bill 239. I'd now like to go to our final bill of the day, House Bill 261, Delegate Branch. Are we muted?
Unmute. unmute yourself, Talmadge.
You know, he's a little older. This is gonna be hard for him.
I'm on mute seat, Delegate Wilson.
Please mute him, Mr. Chairman. And I heard that remark, Delegate Wilson. Anyway, this bill simply regulates battery charged fence security systems. This bill was before us last year. And basically, this bill sets a framework for electric security fences to be recognized in the law and treated the same as other alarm companies. This bill establishes a criteria needed for permits to be issued in quicker fashions. Right now, it takes a minute when someone is trying to get permits. It takes them a minute to get them, sometimes months before they can get permits to even begin to put up these kind of security fences. The bill also defines the electric security fence and codifies that these fences are only used in commercial or industrial areas. They will not be used in residential zones. Simply stated, this issue is that when a business needs security fencing immediately, the permitting process is sometimes taken up to 12 months to complete. Thus, a business owner can be exposed to more theft while a long process runs its course. Companies like UPS, FedExpress, junkyards, landscaping companies, et cetera, they're the companies and the types that use these kind of fences. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I respectfully ask for a favorable report.
Any questions of Delegate Branch? If not, thank you very much. Cindy Williams.
Good evening. I think I would like to defer to Frank Boston to go first, and then I'll follow him if that's okay.
Sure. Frank.
Thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Frank Boston III. I'm a legislative lawyer representing Amarok, which is also known, the product is known as the electric guard dog. We put this bill in last year, ran out of time before the committee could consider it in terms of a vote. And the bill, as Delegate Branch said, codifies a procedure that creates a bright line standard that all counties can use to quicken their approval process. The issue we have is that we go for a permit and counties just don't know how to treat us. And in some cases, it takes up to 6 months to a year for approval. We ultimately get approved, but that doesn't really solve the immediate issue. We're not an invisible fence, as is used for dogs and animals in your yard. We're not a cattle or horse fence. Now, we have similar characteristics of both, but we are a electric fence that goes behind an already existing permitted fence. We're not on the grid, but we are a battery charged 12-volt battery fence. It's not something that's plugged into the electrical systems. Most importantly, we're not residential. We're only in commercial and industrial zones. And basically what the bill says is we will submit an affidavit to the counties, the cities, that we will construct the fence according to the criteria that's set up in this bright line test in the bill. Then the county comes in and inspects. And then if something's wrong, we have a right to cure any issues, or we can get fined or not get the ultimate permit. Once we take care of everything, or if we construct the fence accordingly to the criteria in the bill, we get approved. The example I like to use, it's like putting up a deck in your backyard. You go and pull a permit. You build the deck, you do the work, the county or the city comes out and inspects and says, oh, you got to fix this, you got to do that. Once you cure it, you correct it, you get your use and occupancy permit. It's a similar type of process. I think it's important for the committee to know that the county still has the final approval on whether a permit is issued. Also, the county can charge whatever fee they want. It's more about the time value of money and protecting the property. The ultimate goal is to protect the property from being stolen, damaged, or even trespassing on the large outdoor inventories. Typical clients, as Delegate Branch mentioned, are FedEx, UPS, junkyards, landscaping companies, and large outdoor equipment companies. Interesting enough, in Maryland, it's a very large demand for this product, and so therefore the need is there. In our packet, we have submitted 9 letters from companies throughout the state that have experienced this delay and are supportive of the bill, and they tell their story. With that, we ask the committee for a favorable consideration on this bill, and we thank Delegate Branch for sponsoring the bill.
Let me ask you a question, Frank, if I can. If I'm understanding this correctly, a fence is already up. Now, before the electric fence or the battery powered fence is put up, an approved fence has already been authorized by the local body, and the fence that you guys are advocating would go behind that fence.
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. We already go behind an already existing permitted fence. He's no longer on the committee, but this was a point that Warren Miller brought up at last year's committee. There's already been a fence that's been permitted. We go behind it, we add signage, and Cindy will talk more about this, but we're slightly above the fence. And that's so that, a burglar or a trespasser just can't breach an even fence. So we go, 2 feet above, we go no higher than 10 feet or 2 feet above an already existing fence so that someone can't breach the fence.
Let me ask you this, Frank. About how far back, in terms of setback, do you know, or is that better for the next witness, how far behind the original fence is the fence, the electric fence, the protective fence?
I think it's very close. I'm not sure that this is Cindy can certainly answer that. She'll be an expert in that regard. Yeah.
And you said this is non-residential, commercial only. So we're talking, commercial. We're not talking the aesthetics of a community.
Absolutely. No, totally no. We won't even put it up in a residential, and that's not our clientele. This is totally commercial and industrial. As evidenced by the name Electric Guard Dog, the company started off, the owner, he used to have junkyard dogs that he would rent out overnight to protect junkyards and commercial property. But, he then elevated to an electric fence, but kept the name.
Do you know if the company has had any issues with this fence and other places that allow it, or you said that we have it here. It's just the issue is apparently the length of time that it takes to get approval. Are they telling you why it takes so long?
Yeah. You're right. The issue is in some cases, but actually in many cases, it takes up to 6 months to 9 years. And we ultimately get it. A lot of times it has to go to, I believe the story is it's a zoning issue. It has to go through setback. It has to go through, the site plan review committee. And then, they discuss the variances, et cetera. And what we're saying is, okay, in this bill, we're going to give you the test. We're going to give you the criteria that you can use. We're going to give you that bright line test. And it's all codified, it's centralized And so every jurisdiction can use it. But it's usually.
But they've already approved a fence. This is just a second fence. So what's, I guess, you know, it's that old expression I know we use in committee, belt and suspenders. If you've already approved one fence, what is, well, I guess it's not for you to ask, but and for a later witness, but other than the fact that it's an electric guard dog fence, we've already sort of gone through the approval process for a fence. This is essentially a double fence.
I agree. I agree 100%. There's already been an approval process for the first fence. We won't even construct unless that fence is already there. And we agree. We don't think it should be that big of a delay. I agree with you 100%.
All right.
Chairman.
Delegate Branch.
Yeah, Frank, could you explain a little bit about how, what you run into when you go to these different counties that don't have any regulation at all about it and really just don't know what to do with your request?
Sure, I'll defer that to Cindy, because she actually lives that life and does it and can speak to that immediate question. She's more of an expert on it. And I will say, Cindy will speak to the safety of the fence. It is a safe fence. It's designed to make you jump back. And it's you know, it sends that pulse, that shock. If the fence is breached, the call goes to the property owner. We get notified and it goes to the property owner, not the county. So it's not like we're jamming up the county's or the city's lines with extra alarm calls, even though this is an alarm system, but the notification doesn't go to your local police. It goes to the property owner who makes the determination to call the police.
Okay.
Yep.
Anyone else? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cindy Williams.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to bring this important security matter before you today. Frank and Delegate Branch have done an excellent job in describing what we are. We are really an alarm system, and that's what this bill does. It really helps. This bill will help all parties involved. It helps the local jurisdictions because it defines what we are. We're a battery charged alarm system for the perimeter, just like you have an ADT that protects the building. We protect the property and the assets that can't be stored in a building that go outside. It is a very safe system. It's battery charged. It's a 12-volt battery that charges. It doesn't plug into the grid. It does produce, if someone breaches the perimeter, it sets off an audible alarm at the scene, just like any other alarm system would, and it's monitored 24/7. So it also places that call as any other alarm system would, but instead of calling first responders, it calls out to the business owners who then verify the alarm. So it's really a verified alarm, which is something law enforcement officers are very appreciative of before they would dispatch. Typically what happens, Delegate Branch asked the question, the reason we need this is when I approach a permitting counter and say, I'd like to permit this battery powered fence security system, I get blank stares and nobody knows what it is because oftentimes local codes haven't kept up with more current technology, or if they've never been approached by somebody, it's not something that they would think of as an electric fence in a security application. You think of it more as livestock containment. So there's some confusion. They don't know what department to send it to, who needs to sign off on it. This defines it very clearly. It says it's an alarm system, and then it says, then use your already established alarm permitting processes to permit us, just as you would any other alarm system. So it gives them the confidence to know how to move us through the system, and then it can be moved through the system in a matter of days versus months, which I'm telling you, it's taken over a year in some jurisdictions to get approval. As Frank said, 99.9% of the time we get an approval for the system that we've asked for, but it might be a year later. How else do we help? We help the local businesses. Your local businesses need to get a quicker solution to their crime problem. They can more fast, in a faster scenario, they can protect their property, because some security is an immediate and an urgent need. They don't have months when they're getting broken into week after week. They don't have months to wait to secure their property. It helps your law enforcement officers, because this system stops crime. It doesn't slow it down, it stops it. And therefore, your law enforcement officers aren't responding to property crimes. They can work on things that are more important, and they don't have to go by, file a report, respond to property crimes. So it helps them. And it also helps them because it becomes a verified alarm. And it helps the industry the industry that is the perimeter security industry, helps us to more confidently speak to your businesses and our customers that we do have the ability to get this permitted and install this at your business. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but we do respectfully ask for your support of this bill to help everyone involved in the process.
Delegate Queen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks. So my question was more around, I guess, Cindy, what you were mentioning is you're classifying this as another type of fence that the counties can consider. And I'm asking that because I'm still looking at their objections, and their objections seem to be around the state usurping their responsibility for permitting. And so my question is around, are they not buying or accepting that this should be treated differently, especially because they've already permitted the initial fence there? I guess I'm trying to figure out why we can't reach some sort of agreement with the county about classifying it differently so that it'll go through the process quicker, as you're alluding to. So there's no amendment you guys can come up with that they can agree to?
Well, if I can, I'll speak to the amendments. When we started this out, we back in 19 for last year's bill in the fall, we met with MACO and MML, and throughout the session, we met with them, and during the summer, we met with them. And we've incorporated the bill you have in front of you, incorporated some of their suggestions, most of their suggestions. But I think at the end of the day, and I can't speak for them, their opposition still came down to preemption, and they didn't want to be preempted on this local issue. And you know, I'll repeat what I said earlier. This bill just gives the test. The permitting of the alarm company is still within the local jurisdiction's purview. The ultimate permit and approval and inspection are still of this bill, of this fence, still remains with the local jurisdiction. The charge and the fee associated with this still remains in the local jurisdiction. So all of the power, a lot of the power that they are concerned about being preempted still remains with them. But this creates a state bright line test, standardized criteria that all of the counties can benefit from, and it moves the approval process quicker.
And I think the important part too is that it creates the definition. It defines this as an alarm system. And so then they use whatever process they currently have, but they don't know they don't know what to call us right now. So this helps them more confidently move through their already established or their established processes for alarm systems, because that's truly, we do meet the test for alarm systems.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, I didn't see who it is.
Delegate Howard.
Delegate Howard.
So my question's for Cindy or Frank. How many jurisdictions in Maryland have you applied for these types of permits in?
I think our last time we ran the reports, we had applied in about 70 some jurisdictions, maybe.
And as far as locality is concerned, none of them have taken any type of action to streamline the process for approval?
Yes, some have. Some have.
Okay.
And it has helped, but they've gone, maybe part of the way and not gone the full definition.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Delegate Valderrama?
And forgive me if I missed it, but Frank, you mentioned they had an issue with preemption, but if I'm missing something, so it goes behind an existing fence. So they were already authorized to do that fence. I'm just trying to see what the difference is with this and preempting them when there's already a permit for the fence. Am I missing something?
And I'll have Cindy chime in, but you're right. This goes behind an already existing permitted fence. So you would think that it wouldn't take as long, but I not speaking for the counties, it does. It takes longer, and you would think that with the already existing 5-foot fence or what have you, and again, non-residential, that this process would be quicker, but for whatever reason, it's not. And we won't construct, we won't build, we don't build, we can't build until that other fence is already permitted and constructed. Cindy, I don't know if you want to add.
And I can just mention too, and to answer one of the earlier questions, we mirror the existing fence line. We go about 3 to 12 inches behind that existing fence. So the jurisdiction has already identified that it's an appropriate placement for a fence. And then we mirror that fence line in very close proximity, because those two fences, even though we're standalone, they do work together.
Thank you, Cindy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'd like to go to Alex Butler now, Maryland Association of Counties.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Alex Butler, representing the Maryland Association of Counties, here in opposition to House Bill 261. The electric fences we're discussing in this bill, they're different than any other existing fence. They deliver an electric shock, and simply put, they're not just an alarm system. And we believe local jurisdictions should be allowed to continue permitting them as such. What I understand is that locals have worked on improving the process. However, the bill says that we can't require any additional permits, and we must treat these as alarms, which is our primary concern. Local jurisdictions are not interested in charging exorbitant fees or unnecessarily delaying the process, but they are interested in retaining the authority to regulate and permit the addition of new structures as they see fit. Local land use permitting and zoning is inherently a local issue. We have a concern from the industry that can be and is being addressed in many areas by local jurisdictions as they see these applications. I think a reasonable step here would be to address the concerns of the industry, to amend the bill into a model ordinance that local jurisdictions could choose to adopt as they sort of see more of these fences, as they see these battery charged electric fences. This could give local government a clear path forward, a clear framework. And if they've never seen these structures before and they'd like to adopt something to deal with them differently, then they would absolutely have that option. We do this in a variety of topics. Last year, we supported a model ordinance for a definition of agricultural alcohol production for use in the land use code. This approach would maintain that local authority and help local jurisdictions as they see more of these permits. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll conclude my testimony and just say that MACO does oppose the bill as written. Thank you very much.
So cutting to the chase, this is a turf war? I mean, basically. I know it doesn't sound whatever, but this is essentially we control zoning, and therefore we want to maintain that authority. I mean, that's, I guess there's a period after that, because that's what it sounds like. It seems, because it's not a new bill, but it's, from my perspective, it shouldn't take 6 months, let alone a year, to approve it. I used to work for our county council many years ago, so I have a familiarity with zoning and how it works. But it seems to me, as I noted earlier, and Delegate Valderrama noted, there's already been a permitted fence for that area. So really it does, you've done setbacks and departures from design standards and all of those other things that may be necessary. You did that with the first fence. The second fence comes behind something that's already been done. So I guess I'm trying to find out what goes on over that next 6 to 12 months. It seems like to me that could be a rapid approval. And if it's not, then it does sound like we need some sort of test case or something so that it's much more expeditiously done. We shouldn't need to, after a fence has already been approved. And as a legislator, quite frankly, most of the time, I'll speak for myself when I get complaints about things, it's in residential neighborhoods. It's not in the commercial zone that, oh, well, they have this fence that's, no, you get that in residential neighborhoods. So I guess what I'm asking is, can you help me to understand why does it take so long for a second fence that's basically mirroring the first fence, and how come we can't have a much more rapid approval process for a fence?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I think that, it is a new structure at the end of the day. And I think that we would like to retain our just basic authority to permit those fences, and in many ways, there may be a possibility that you can streamline the process. If it is very similar to another fence, then you can, local jurisdictions that have seen these types of fences before develop processes over a little bit of time to know how to treat them. And I think that a model ordinance that local jurisdictions can go ahead, look at and say, okay, here's what we have. We have more battery electric charge fences coming into our jurisdiction. These permits are coming in, and we like to adopt something that allows us to treat them, to our local community's taste, but also, streamlines the process a little bit for the company. I think we're sympathetic. I don't think any jurisdiction wants to unnecessarily hold up a permit. But I think that, we do get very, very cautious about, especially the issue of preemption. And at the end of the day, it is a structure to us, and it is a new construction of a structure. So I think there could be a middle ground here where we can, over a little bit of time, really increase, the efficiency here in relation to these types of fences. And I think that a model ordinance would really, really go a long way for local jurisdictions to really know what they're dealing with and make it work for themselves, for the community, and for the industry.
Anyone?
I have a question.
Who do I have? Who?
It's a delegate.
Oh, Madam Vice Chair.
In your testimony, Mr. Bradley, you said something about permitting alarms. And I guess I'm still also similar to the chair, trying to figure out if your objection is to the new structure or to the alarm. Is there a permitting process for alarms separate and apart from this fence issue?
It is my understanding that there is a permitting process for an alarm. And what we have here is local jurisdictions treating them as structures, which we maintain that they are. And the bill, the way I understand it, is it would run it through an alarm. It would define them as basically an alarm. You'd run it through your alarm permitting system, and we can't require additional permitting for a fence. So that's kind of our understanding of the bill right now. And if we had a sort of model definition that local jurisdictions could then go for and adopt, that is very narrowly defined as a battery charged electric fence, and if there could even be possibly provisions in there for if it was already behind an existing fence, in an effort to streamline the process, I think we'd be happy to take a look at that. But I don't believe that the fences are strictly alarms. They do act as an alarm. They notify the property owner when somebody does touch it, and I believe they also deliver a low voltage shock. But it is still a fence, and it's still a structure.
Unless we decide it's not. But, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? If not, Bill George, pinch hitting for the Maryland Municipal League.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Bill George here representing the Maryland Municipal League in opposition to House Bill 261. I agree with a lot of what Alex said from the county's perspective. We are aligned with them quite closely on the troublesome aspects of the preemption. I just wanted to address a couple of questions maybe that have come up already, and that is, permitting of a fence that's already behind an existing fence. Is that, I can only speculate, but I would imagine that there would be a little bit more scrutiny if two fences were being put up at the same time when the initial permit was being reviewed, right? So even though, this particular company is going to claim that their fence is not particularly visually impactful, that it's really just some posts and some strings of wire. Perhaps another battery charge fence company comes along that is a little bit more visually impactful and could affect sight lines near rights of way and that sort of thing. The other is the issue of the alarm permit, and that has been touched on a little bit before. And yes, there are many local jurisdictions that do have alarm permits in place already, but they are really designed and tailored towards the more traditional alarm systems that you and I may think of, and that is with a keypad, near the door that has literally no visual or structural impact on the rest of the property. It's all internal and has to do with doors and windows and that sort of thing. This is, as been mentioned, is actually, it has a structural element to it in addition to the alarm aspect to it. So while an alarm permit would likely need to be pulled as well, this does have a different aspect to it than your traditional ADT alarm or the like. So that being said, MML joins NACO in opposition to this bill.
Any questions for Mr. George? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Branch.
You guys keep talking about the community and da-da-da-da-da, but again, the bill says that it will be only in a commercial or industrial area. So you don't have neighborhoods or residential communities even around such a fence. And also the whole idea and reason the bill is here is because of the timing, 6 to 12 months of getting a permit. That's the issue. I mean, not that they can't get it, not that they're worried about what's already in place. They can get it, but it's 6 to 12 months. And certainly to find that companies like the ones that we mentioned that already have it, large companies that already have it, I'm just trying to understand, why is this so different? I mean, it is a security fence protecting trucks and other important items that might be behind the fence. I mean, I'm just trying to get where the local government is coming from with this and why they want to keep the process 6 to 12 months.
So I can respond briefly, Delegate, and I don't believe that I can speak for our municipalities that the goal is not to have a long and burdensome process. And in fact, when in discussions with some of our jurisdictions over the interim, as has been mentioned earlier, that when this structure and alarm system has been kind of brought to a local jurisdiction and kind of contextualized as to what it is and what they're trying to do, that the process gets much faster. I can't say exactly how much faster, but it does get significantly faster. And in terms of, yes, I understand that the bill is designed and restricted to non-residential zones. And when I say visual impact, I'm talking more about not necessarily aesthetics, but safety near rights of way, perhaps at an intersection where a fence may block some sort of vehicular sight lines on a corner, that sort of thing. I'm not saying that's the case in every instance, but it is something that needs to be taken into consideration.
Anyone else? If not, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 261.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I think Delegate Pippi had a question.
Yes.
Delegate Pippi.
I don't want to keep everybody. Just real quick for Mr. George, it really sounds like this is kind of like red tape on steroids. And my question is, assuming this bill doesn't pass, what are the local municipalities going to do differently to ensure that, these customers are able to get a decision on their application in a timely manner? Because when things don't happen in a succinct manner, that usually ends up coming to Annapolis, to get resolved. And I think that's the broader issue here. So if you could just address that, that's my question.
Understood. And absolutely, I can I can tell you what the Maryland Municipal League can do, and that is work with our members on behalf of this type of structure, and that is help them. If we know in advance of some of the cities that this company may be going to, helping and draft, as Alex mentioned, perhaps a model ordinance to help them kind of narrowly define what this is, so that when it comes to them, they'll have a better idea of how to process it. The league is here for our members and to assist you all as well with information distribution, and that could absolutely be something that we'd be more than happy to help with.
Thank you.
All righty, we'll try this one more time. Thank you all very much. We'll obviously spend some more time via subcommittee discussing some of the bills that we've heard today. Tomorrow, yes, tomorrow, I know tomorrow's a big day, but we're still going to meet. I think we got bill hearings scheduled tomorrow. They are still in fact on. We will do that and keep the process moving. So thank everybody. I very much appreciate you being here. To our bill sponsors and witnesses, certainly thank you for your contributions to the process, and everyone have a good afternoon.